Councillor Di Ciano.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My questions are to the Executive Director of ML&S. Can you, with respect to the holistics businesses or industries in the city, can you give me basically the role of what the professional holistic associations play in licensing these businesses?
Through you, Madam Speaker, it was an amendment to the bylaw done in 2005 where the acceptance or the requirement to provide proof of membership in a professional holistic association was embedded in the bylaw. The effort there was to ensure that only those that were operating with legitimate support of legitimate professional holistic associations would be permitted to operate. It was actually done prior to that when we started licensing holistics back in 1998. It would require a certificate from a college, and it was found that colleges were creating really false paper. So the move then in 2005 was to add this lens of professional holistic associations, which I believe to Councillor Plazio's point, there are some. There are absolutely legitimate professional holistic practitioners. Unfortunately, some people have found a way to take advantage of that loophole, if it were. Bearing in mind the professional holistic associations that are allowed to be approved for holistic practitioner and center licensing are those that are approved by council. So the bylaw currently has professional holistic associations that met the requirements of the bylaw, which were primarily paper-based. And at the time, we did not allow for a delisting or a removal process. So what we've had are people exploiting this position in the bylaw as a professional holistic association, and people have taken advantage of it.
Okay, so given that now there's this, or there has been this proliferation of holistic centers across the city, dealing in activities that really are not warranted or allowed, can you explain to me how this really turned into the issue that it is today from, you know, as far back as the 70s?
Yeah. So through you, Madam Speaker, from what I've determined, that we started licensing body rub parlors back in the 70s to deal with some issues that were occurring, particularly on Yonge Street, and I believe there was an impetus around some very significant criminal offenses that occurred. So the body rub parlor license regime was created in order to carve out an appropriate, proper regulatory regime, a body rub parlor operation. What we saw, unlike or not dislike many other things, some people take advantage, and we've had a proliferation of illegally operating premises, some that are offering services like a body rub parlor without the body rub parlor license and the provisions and the protections under that regulation. So the effort was taken to create this holistics license regime to assist in combating that, while at the same time ensuring that those providing holistic services were properly regulated. This could easily have been a public garage license that was used to become something other than what it was licensed to be. So we've ended up in this position where an industry of peoples have exploited the use of a proper license, being a holistics license in this case, and are operating and providing services that ought to be regulated under a different regime, which would be the body rub parlor licensing regime.
Okay, what essentially needs to happen now in order for us to get this situation under control, in your opinion?
Through you, Madam Speaker, we absolutely need to review the regulatory regime around both the body rub parlor licensing and the role of the holistics license, separate and apart from each other, though they have become conflated somewhat. And that review needs to be undertaken and with the lens of how do we address properly and regulate appropriately a type of business, in this particular case, the body rub parlor business, and make sure that the people operating within it are subject to an appropriate level of regulation with the proper public safety and consumer protection supports. It requires the full bylaw review. And in that respect, in the Auditor General's report, we wholeheartedly agreed that a fulsome review of both of these articles of 545, the licensing bylaw, needs to be undertaken.
Okay, thank you. So just one last question. In the absence of bringing forward a review and working to rectify these loopholes, from a health and safety perspective, a human trafficking perspective, do we lose, if things were to stay the status quo, do we lose control of being able to bring forward health and safety aspects to the industry?
So through you, Madam Speaker, I would say yes. With every regulation that we craft, the goal is to implement the appropriate level of regulation to ensure the appropriate level of public safety, consumer protection for the public and for the workers. The case we have right now, we have people acting in different types of capacities without being afforded the protection that a proper regulatory regime would put in place, recognizing the nature of the industry.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
What I will say is it's a complex area and law enforcement can be difficult. We absolutely need to take the time to do the best that we can to ensure that we have legislation that is clear and enforceable. I believe we have some opportunity for improvement in what we have. We are partnering with the Toronto Police Service. We all have various mandates that we follow through with. We're responsible for issuing business licenses, and as I was commenting previously, when someone comes in and applies for a license and they meet the requirements of the bylaw, they obtain that license. If they later start acting in a manner that is non-compliant, then that's where the enforcement comes in. And we need to be able to procure sufficient evidence to prove offenses so that my good colleagues in the courts can prosecute. So unfortunately, it's not a simple process. There's a balance of someone's right to earn a living and their right to a business license with meeting the requirements we prescribe. But I know everyone's best efforts are on this, and in respect to your reference to human trafficking, we recognize that exploitation can occur in any of our businesses. It's happening in our hotels and motels, and that partnership that the city has with the police service on that front is critical.
All right. Councillor Di Ciano.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have a motion, if we can put that up on the screen, and I'll read it out. With respect to item AU 10.3, that City Council direct the Executive Director of Municipal Licensing and Standards to report back to the February 26, 2018 Licensing and Standards Committee with recommendations and the feasibility of the following. A, delisting the 10 professional holistic associations from the Auditor General's report dated October 24, 2017, headed A Review of the Municipal Licensing and Standard Division's Management of Business Licenses, Part 2, Holistic Centers. B, delegating the authority to the Executive Director of Municipal Licensing and Standards to delist professional holistic associations, removing the restriction on the number of body rub parlor licenses, and creating eligibility criteria for the issuance of body rub parlor licenses, including the requirement that any new body rub parlor license can only be issued to owners of a licensed holistic center in areas where current zoning permits. 2, City Council direct the Executive Director of Municipal Licensing and Standards to ensure that in preparation of the report in Part 1 above, the necessary consultation is undertaken, including the Chief Medical Officer of Health, community groups, and advocates, specifically to identify opportunities to mitigate risk related to public health, exploitation, including human trafficking. 3, City Council direct the Executive Director of Municipal Licensing and Standards to report to the Budget Committee through the 2018 budget process on the projected costs and potential revenue sources necessary to increase the enforcement complement of the division by 1 supervisor and 4 municipal standard officers, including appropriately marked and equipped vehicles and equipment to enhance dedicated enforcement officers related to non-compliant businesses currently operating with holistic licenses. Madam Speaker, I want to begin by thanking the Auditor General and our Director of ML&S for working together to help us really understand what's going on here. And the results are, the facts are, that the current regime or the current rules that we as a city have in place have led directly to the proliferation of unlawful holistic operations in our city. And that's a problem. This motion here today is one of the single most important reviews we've probably undertaken in 40 years to make sure that we begin to fix this problem. What this motion does is it is finally going to provide our staff the ability to close those loopholes that led to this problem in the first place. Our staff did not have the ability to do that. This motion is going to do that. This motion is also going to ensure that we have an adult conversation about the adult industry and understand that it's not going away. And we actually have the ability to deal with this, and we do need to deal with it. And of course, this motion is finally going to allow operators who are operating illegally the ability to operate within the rules. And that is great news for those in communities that have to deal with the proliferation of these businesses. Our neighborhoods don't deserve it. Our families don't deserve it. We have the regime in place to make sure that legal body rub parlors are operating in industrial areas. That's where they should be. And I hope you can support this so that we make sure that we finally start dealing with this problem once and for all. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Palacio, 3 minutes, clarification of the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Councillor Di Ciano, it's your intention with regards to recommendation number 3 is to have an enforcement body that deals with illegal businesses and overall. Is that your intention, for example, to have not only the ML&S staff, but the Toronto Police Service, the alcohol and gaming, to have the ability just to charge those who are involved in illegal activities and to create some evidence eventually to revoke the license? Is that the intention overall within that recommendation?
Yeah, there's no doubt, and thank you. That's a very important part of the solution. By putting together a dedicated team over at ML&S who can work with our police, work with public health, work with all the agencies, alcohol and gaming. If we've got, it has to start within the city, and that dedicated team of people, once you put them together and that's all they're dealing with, then they can make that concerted effort to talk to our police, talk to the AGCO, talk to all the agencies, external agencies that need to be helping to address the problem.
So if that's the intention, would you be willing to make a friendly amendment? Unfortunately, I already spoke, is maybe to create a kind of enforcement body that brings people together in the enforcement agencies together for that purpose.
I have no problems with that, Councillor Palacio.
That's great. The next question that I have is in 1A, in terms of the list and the professional holistic associations. And those are the ones that are not in compliance, so city staff will have that power just to go and just get rid of them. Is that the intention overall?
Yeah, that is one of the most important elements in this whole kind of redesign of how the system works. We know that in order to get your license for a holistic center, you need to be a member of one of these associations. Well, we also know that there's a lot of these associations that aren't operating in the laws and really adhering to the standards that were originally put forward for holistic centers to operate under. So allowing us to delist those associations immediately puts the people who are not operating their holistic centers in conforming with the law, basically in contravention of their business license. So that allows our staff to go out there and say, unless you're part of an association that's following the rules, you can't be in business.
Great. My last question is, in terms of removing the restriction on the number of body rub parlors licenses, is that your intention overall, is either to have the equalizer in terms of increasing the fees to everyone, the body rub parlors, overall, all throughout, to whatever the fee, it can be $50,000, $25,000, whatever, that's the current one, or simply flattening or lowering to nothing, just to, is that your intention overall?
Yeah, thanks for the question.
That's your last question.
And thank you for that question. You know, I've had discussions with our director on where the fees need to go, and this report, we will undertake a review of where those fees have to go. I can pretty much guarantee that the current regimen is not going to stay in place. But, you know, removing the number of body rub parlors is going to allow, you know, to have the adult conversation. We need to allow those that are operating illegally to get into conformity with the rules.
Okay,
And then, is there, in D asks for the creating of eligibility criteria. Is there none in place now?
Yeah, so that is, there's some language in there that's going to help us deal with those that are operating illegally right now, that are operating as holistic centers, to get them to go towards a more legal way of operating, which would allow them to go into areas of the city that we already allow for this. So that's what that part does.
Those are my questions, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you.
When it comes back in February, this report hopefully will outline how we deal with the proliferation of illegal body rub parlors operating under the guise of holistic centers.
Thank you. Councillor Wong Tam, clarification.
Yes, thank you very much. And I've been listening very carefully as the councillor answers a number of questions regarding the motive and the intention of the motion. But what I didn't hear is the community impact and who are we trying to protect? If you can just give us some clarification to that.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. It's very, very important. So currently right now, if you're operating under a holistic center, there is no protection for the people working inside these centers. Those that operate legal body rub parlors, we actually as a city right now have a regime in place where we go and we test for STDs. Public health is involved. There's licenses required by those that are working in the industry. So, you know, we want to take this from the underground and bring it to the forefront. And really, Councillor, to have that adult conversation requires us, you know, to acknowledge that there is an entire industry right now that's being unregulated. It's unsafe for those that are operating within it. And we want to make sure that as this is an industry that's never going to go away, that those who are operating in it are doing it legally and safely from a public health standpoint.
How does this fit within the framework of sex work?
So, you know, there has been decisions by the Supreme Court. Obviously, within a body rub parlor license, we know that sexual intercourse is not a legal a part of the business, but there are, I was feeling a little uncomfortable talking with those behind us, but they're gone now. But there are, it would still remain illegal for a customer to walk into a body rub parlor today and ask, solicit sex for a given fee. It would not be illegal if the worker within the facility were to solicit for a fee. So those are the rules that are in place. It seems to be working very well with the 25 licenses that we have out there from a public health standpoint. So I'm just hoping that we can further correct this problem.
And so is the intention, and I think I'm starting to understand, so is the intention to also protect the exploited worker, the individuals, the survivors and victims of human trafficking, perhaps those who are forced into sex work, not those who are choosing sex work on their own? Is that part of the intention of your motion, is to sort of dig deeper to ensure that those holistic centers are going to fall under the category of body rub parlor, but at the same time put tighter regulations around body rub parlors?
Okay, that was your last question.
Yeah, and thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. Number 2 in my motion talks about getting the chief officer, or the chief medical officer of health to report on mitigating the risks related to not only public health, but exploitation and human trafficking.
I don't think your motion deals with illegal activities within so-called legalized establishments.
Legal or illegal establishment?
Legal establishments.
Legal
Establishments that have a license.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
My motion speaks entirely to those operating illegally.
Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Just 2 brief questions. 1A and 1B. Did you consult the city solicitor in those recommendations?
Yes, I have. I spoke with the city solicitor. I spoke with the deputy city manager. We had extensive conversations between myself and Tracy Cook for municipal licensing and standards, including the chief planner as well.
And they all concur?
They all concur with the much-needed review that this would undertake.
Okay. And 1C, your removal of the restriction on body rubs. What do you anticipate that will happen out of that? Are you assuming that the illegal holistics will move to an area that's zoned body rub? Is that your assumption?
Oh, we're hoping that happens. Again, we are asking staff to review the removal of the restrictions and what what that possibility entails. I'm not sure. I'll wait with the rest of us to see what the report says. But
Through you to the councillor, the word removing in 1C is a strong word. Why choose removing over simply modifying or providing additional body rub parlor licenses? This is wide open.
Again, Councillor, it is asking the Executive Director of Municipal Licensing and Standards to undertake a review of removing the restrictions. And we had extensive conversations, just to your point. Do we just bring 25 more? Do we bring 50 more? And it was determined that really that's going to be an arbitrary number. And if we want to deal with the problem, allow people to operate legally, we have the framework to allow them to operate legally. We know that those that are operating legally are not bringing any problems to communities. So there will be a report that comes out, but ultimately we came to the decision in our consultations that remove is something we need to look at.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor, you've asked for a report to come back February 26th, understanding that the budget process can be well on its way, if not almost complete. So have you talked to the Director of Municipal Licensing and Standards to ensure that she could get whatever information the Budget Committee needs to make any decisions prior to the 26th report?
Yeah, that's a great question, Councillor. And yes, the Director of MLS has indeed assured me that she'll have the answers to us at budget time when needed.
Perfect, thank you.
And we have amendment motion number 1 by Councillor Di Ciano. Councillor Karygiannis is asking that 1 be separated A, B, and C. So A, recorded vote.
Part 1A of the motion carries 39-2.
Okay, Part B, recorded vote.
Part 1B carries 39-2.
Part C, recorded vote. And then that's it. No, with the whole thing. Those are the only 3 that he requested to be voted on separately.
Part 1C carries 23-18.
Okay, on the remainder of the motion, on favor, carried.